How do you amend your tax return? I'm Kimberly Shapcott, qualified chartered accountant, property investor and entrepreneur. Let's sit down and have a chat. Tax returns all filed, fantastic. However, have you found that you've missed something? That you've missed an expense, or you've understated your rental income, or something is not quite right in that tax return? And you're thinking, I need to amend it. What do I have to do? Well, let's have a look at that process today to see how we go about amending things in your tax return, as there's some bits that are relatively straightforward and easy to do, and there's other areas which may take a bit more work, but hopefully it gets the right result for you. Now, I suppose the starting point for this is, why would you need to be amending your tax return? I know one of the questions I get asked quite a lot is, can I claim interest on my tax return? And the answer is, well, yes and no. You can't claim interest, but you can claim it as a tax credit. And I've had quite a few people in recent years who've gone, I've not done that. That means I paid more tax than I was meant to. And the answer is, well, yes you have. So ideally, you want to be able to go back and fix some of that so that you can get a bit of that excessive tax that you have sadly paid already. And hopefully it reduces that tax burden that you have had. There are other reasons why you may have to amend things, like you've missed expenses that you didn't realise you could claim, or something was overlooked. So what are the options for changing things? Now, for any tax return that's just been filed, that's hopefully a relatively straightforward process. So for anything filed before the tax deadline, so if we think we're in 2024 now, if I do the tax return in May, June 2024 after the end of the tax year, I do it straight away and then realise, I've not done it quite right. You can go back on and amend that tax return up until the actual tax return deadline with no issues whatsoever. So hopefully that's one way, if you're getting your tax return done early, that you can just fix it. Now, this is on HMRC systems, or if you use an accountant, they'll be able to hopefully on their software send in amended tax returns. I know we can with our software. So with that approach, you can send an adjusted tax return before the deadline. You might say, but it's actually to do with last year's tax return and we're now after the tax return deadline. Not a problem. For up to 12 months after the tax return deadline, you've actually now got 12 months after the filing deadline. So for anything filed for 2023 that was due in by the 31st of January 2024, you've now got 12 months if there are any amendments that you need to make. So again, a relatively hopefully straightforward process that you can either maybe go onto HMRC's website and do it that way if that's the approach that you've taken on doing it yourself, or again, speak to your accountant and they should be able to amend the tax return using their software and get that submitted with your approval. So there we go, a couple of options to look at amending tax returns. A few points to note though, if you are doing it online, you will need to probably wait at least 3 days before you can do an amendment. That's because it needs time to get logged onto HMRC's system for them to acknowledge that tax returns being accepted. And then when it's been accepted, then they will enable you to make an amendment to the one that they've already got logged on their system. For paper returns, it's a little more cumbersome because you'll have to print off the pages that are incorrect, do a letter, and then send them the updated pages with a letter just to tell them that those pages have been updated. But again, hopefully nothing too overwhelming and just a little bit of extra paperwork. For anyone who's using an accountant, they will likely be using commercial software, or you may yourself be using commercial software. And on most commercial software, you can submit amended tax returns. So that means they should be able to just make the amendments and then do the online submission on your behalf after you've approved it. So again, here we're talking several different options depending on how you have approached submitting your tax return to HM Revenue and Customs. If you are, however, outside that 1 year window and it's for a tax return that is from 2022 or before, then you'll need to do things in a slightly different way, as HMRC will not enable you to do things electronically, online, and it does come down to doing things on paper. So for these positions, you will need to write a letter to HMRC, and this letter will need to detail what the mistake, the amendment needs to be, and include details on the tax return pages of what adjustments have and need to be made to correct the tax returns. These claims can be put in up to 4 years later. And please note, this is 4 years after the end of the tax year it relates to. So at this point in early 2024, we are going back to early 2020 at this point that you can make any amendment. So if you do have some amendments to be making, you do need to be making sure you are putting these in as soon as possible so that you're not losing a year from the beginning point. Because obviously as you hit the next point, we're going to be losing the 2020 year and it will be 21 to 24 that you can be doing. So make sure if you do have any amendments that you get those in sooner than later so that you are logging those with HMRC so you start that amendment process. Assuming it's started, then obviously you can continue through that process to ensure that that amendment is completed. If the amendment's not logged, then that one will get lost because it will become out of time to make the amendment. So key point here is do not delay. What needs to therefore go in this letter? Well, in this letter, you need to be telling them the tax year that you are correcting and what you think you've paid too much or too little, depending on the position that you're putting in. You will need to sign this as well because no one else can sign this on your behalf. As an agent, we can submit these sorts of claims for you, but we will need to get your approval and we will need certain information from you to enable these claims to be put through. If you're making a claim to repay tax, then you will also need to add some extra things, which is an overpayment relief claim and also show details that the tax has actually been paid, as they're obviously not going to refund you something that you've never paid in the first place. They need to know how much you are reclaiming, how much you want to be repaid, and they also want you to confirm that this is not a further attempt at a reclaim that you've already tried to do in the past. And finally, a declaration to say that to the best of your knowledge that this is true and accurate, so that you're taking responsibility for the fact that this hopefully is going to then be the final return that needs doing. For any adjustments that are made, these will get shown on the HMRC portal and they will send correspondence to confirm that the claim's been done within a couple of weeks. Theoretically online it should be hopefully a couple of days, but it's up to HMRC systems and how quickly they get done. Paper side of things is probably more 4 to 6 weeks as a minimum, depending how they're getting on with their post at that point in time. I believe their website says it will be about 4 weeks, but I know depending on service levels that can be slightly extended sometimes as well. As you can see, you can amend your tax return. However, the key thing here to me is don't delay. If there is any amendments, any item of expenses that you should have claimed that you haven't claimed, please make sure you do get these claims in as soon as possible so that you don't find that you lose out on years where you could have claimed something that you didn't realise, but you need to go back and make amendments. If you have underpaid tax, you've only realised that you've underpaid tax, so this may be you've been taking off your finance costs when you shouldn't have been and you should be using Section 24, and you've been doing that incorrectly, make sure you go back and you get that updated and corrected as soon as possible so that you don't find that you're getting any aspect inquiries from HMRC because they think that you've done something wrong. So then at least everything is on your page. You're the one in control of any updates and changes to make sure that your self-assessment is assessed correctly. Hopefully today you've discovered how to amend your tax return if you have made a small mistake. If you have a question, then please do leave a comment. Please like the video and please do subscribe to the channel. And let's make tax less taxing.